Hello, Harry Potter fans. Welcome back to The Phoenix's Tale, the weekly Harry Potter themed podcast where I am sharing my life story through a chapter by chapter analysis of the entire Harry Potter book series. I am your host, Gabe, and this week we finally get sorted. I mean, we dive into chapter 7 of Harry Potter and the Sorcerer's Stone, the sorting hat. As you can see, I got my Ravenclaw Quidditch shirt on. So let's go get sorted. Actually, before we begin, this is the first July episode of the podcast, so we need to go over some character birthdays this month. And July is the month. So, first off, we wish a very happy birthday to the one and only Seamus Finnegan, born on the 14th. We have Narcissa Black Malfoy on the 19th. Alistair Mad-Eye Moody, happy birthday to Mad-Eye on the 27th. To one of my favorite characters, and especially the character arc that we see throughout the entire series, the one and only Neville Longbottom on July 30th. And of course, we cannot forget the man himself, Harry Potter, on the 31st. So happy birthday to all of our Potter characters for the month. And we are going to let's do a brief recap of the chapter before we really get going here. So, Harry, Ron, and their fellow first years arrive at Hogwarts and are escorted into the Great Hall by Professor McGonagall. Harry assumes correctly that she is not someone to cross. We meet some of the Hogwarts ghosts. We got, namely, Nearly Headless Nick of Gryffindor and the Fat Friar from Hufflepuff. The first years go through the sorting ceremony where they're trying on the sorting hat, and it tells them in which house they will belong during their time at Hogwarts. Harry notices Professor Snape, and for the first time in his life, I do believe, feels a sharp pain in his scar when he's staring at Professor Snape, who was speaking to Professor Quirrell at the time. That comes in later on in the series. Harry especially notices that Snape doesn't seem to like him very much, just based on that real quick exchange, during the welcoming feast. And we close out the chapter with the new Gryffindor first years being led up to their dormitories by the new house prefect, Percy. And Harry, having had a very strange dream the night before that, woke him up in a cold sweat, but is quickly forgotten as he goes back to sleep. Those of us familiar with the story, with the books, know that, there's a lot of foreshadowing in that particular dream as it's described in the books. So we're going to talk about the characteristics of each house, and I pulled this directly from this chapter, from the Sorting Hat's song that it sings before the sorting ceremony starts. First up, we have Gryffindor, where dwell the brave at heart. Their daring nerve and chivalry set Gryffindors apart. Then we have Hufflepuff, where they are just and loyal. Those patient Hufflepuffs are true and unafraid of toil. Hard work, loyalty. That's Hufflepuff. Ravenclaw. Let me show you my shirt again. If you've a ready mind, where those of wit and learning will always find their kind. And then we have Slytherin, who those cunning folks use any means to achieve their ends. And this comes directly from the books and gives us a first look at how the students from each house tend to look upon one another. Specifically, that Slytherins are, more often than not, most likely to succumb to the dark arts in some way. We learned that this is not the case with future characters necessarily, but we'll circle back to that as we meet them later in the series. However, I will make two notable, the two that I'm thinking of right now. We are talking about Dolores Umbridge, and we are talking about Horace Slughorn. Again, we're going to dive into the differences between who these characters are as it applies to being Slytherins, and how just because you're a Slytherin does not necessarily mean you are going to fall into the dark arts. Okay, but again, we'll wait until we actually meet those two characters in the series. Honestly, I do want to make a note real quick, and again, we'll dive into it when we get into Chamber of Secrets. But I would have placed Gilderoy Lockhart in Slytherin primarily because of the similarities that I see between him and Horace Slughorn. But I know it's canon that he was in Ravenclaw, which I'm not especially proud of because that's my house. But when you consider how ambitious Gilderoy Lockhart is in following his own path to fame and glory, those felt more like Slytherin traits to me than they did Ravenclaw traits. So, again, we'll take a deeper dive into that when we meet Lockhart in the next book, and then further on down the road when we meet Dolores Umbridge and Horace Slughorn. Oh, it's been a week, you guys. I want to talk about Professor McGonagall for a moment because she is by far one of my absolute favorite teachers at Hogwarts. But I want to talk about this in a different way. Can you imagine how she felt seeing Harry for the first time? Again, not to jump ahead of our story, but given the fact that there are hints throughout the entire series where she seems amused by the antics of the Weasley twins, Harry and Ron's antics, and then the antics of the Marauders. I'm not going to spoil this for those who don't know this story, who the Marauders are. We get into that down the road. I noted this in this particular chapter because she's giving all the first years a basic rundown of what's going to happen. The sorting ceremony is about to start. It will choose your house for you, and they will become your family here at Hogwarts. And she tells the first years to smarten themselves up as she notices Neville's twisted robes, fastened up under his left ear or something like that, and then the smudged dirt on Ron's nose. Harry quickly tries to flatten down his hair, which we learn is very much like James. Kind of sticks out all over the place, as it's often described. And again, how often it's described, we heard this from Hagrid a couple chapters back, that how much Harry looks like his father, except for his eyes. He has Lily's eyes. So I couldn't help but notice that there was no reaction in the narrative from Professor McGonagall about Harry at all. She was probably highly amused, I think, to see Harry's attempts at flattening his hair. I mean, if that were me, I would have just kind of laughed to myself, going, "Oh boy, that's a losing matter, Potter. Sorry." But can you imagine for a minute how emotional she had to have felt seeing Harry for the first time as an 11-year-old? She probably, like everybody else, just immediately saw James. And how emotional she would have been about that, because she was the one in her animagus form that sat outside Privet Drive, number 4 Privet Drive, the whole day, the day that she and Dumbledore and Hagrid first take Harry to the Dursleys after Lily and James are killed. Um, yeah, I can't imagine how she might have felt to that. But again, on the amusing side of things, I think she probably thought it was hilarious that Harry was trying to flatten his hair that sticks out in every which way direction. Um, so, kind of got some of that out of the way. But I want to share a story with you guys about something that popped into my head when I was doing the research for this particular chapter. Um, and I haven't thought about this one in years, so I felt like this was a good one to share. It was about the beginning of my sixth grade year, so 11 or almost 11. I have a November birthday, and it seems like this happened just before my birthday, where our school sent all the sixth graders to an environmental camp for the week. And they had all sorts of fun activities for us. One of them was a night hike. And there was one little stretch in which the camp counselors and, the people running the camp, as well as the high school kids that were our counselors individually in the cabins, we had to walk a short stretch of that alone in the dark in the foothills of the Sierra Nevada mountains in Northern California. I was fucking terrified. Um, and when I talked to my camp counselor about it, the one who was in charge of our cabin, um, she could tell that I was scared. And she told me, because she was next in line behind me, she says, if you're really scared, just walk a little way until you can't see us anymore or we can't see you, and then just wait for me. Well, despite my terror in that moment, I actually did it. I didn't stop and wait for her. And I made it the entire way. And I remember my counselor telling me that I had done a good job, and I was just relieved that it was over. Yet I was quite proud of myself for something like that. Um, Naturally, that sense of pride didn't last long because my father shot that down as soon as I had gotten home at the end of the week and told him all about it. But this is one memory that I have carried with me for years while I have navigated my new path forward. Um, and the new path that I was forging, a couple weeks ago, I shared my epiphany moment and the fact that all of my father's assertions about me, I suddenly doubted. And that's where things drastically change, because when I doubt something and I am curious about something, I am tenacious. Ravenclaw. Um, I am tenacious until I find, the truth, basically. And that particular story from my childhood is one that carried me for a very long time and carried me a long way, because every time I got scared that, oh, I got to do something new, I got to do something different, I don't like this situation, this is freaking me out a bit, I would remember that night hike memory, in particular the part that I had to go alone on, and we each had to do this in turn. So the first few years, once that doubt set in from the epiphany moment I talked about a couple weeks ago, um, yeah, that one helped me because it was a situation that I didn't think I could do, but I did it and I survived. And I felt pretty fucking proud of myself. And I have since reclaimed that pride that, as I just mentioned, my father was just, he was an asshole. I'm just going to say it. Anyway, I do this week, we are going to touch on a little bit more in depth about what it means to be autistic, specifically when it comes to all of those moments in my childhood when I felt confused because of all of the ambiguity in the instructions that I was given. Um, so let's dive in. This is our psychology talk for the episode. Okay, and I'm going to be reading this again. I used my researching tools at my disposal, and here's what we got. So I wanted to look at from a scientific perspective as an autistic person, instruction following challenges in autistic children specifically. From a psychological standpoint, autistic children often experience significant challenges when asked to follow instructions independently. This difficulty arises from several interrelated cognitive and neurological factors commonly associated with autism spectrum disorder. Autism spectrum disorder. Number one, literal interpretation of language. Research consistently shows that autistic individuals tend to interpret language more literally than their neurotypical peers. Figurative expressions, implied meanings, or vague instructions can lead to confusion, as autistic children may not intuitively infer context or read between the lines. This literalism is linked to differences in multimodal information integration and the tendency to focus on rule following, which can make ambiguous directions especially challenging. I was a big rule follower because I figured there had to be these rules for a reason, even if the rules didn't make sense. 2. Executive functioning differences. Executive function refers to cognitive processes like planning, organizing, initiating tasks, and maintaining focus. Many autistic children have difficulties with executive functioning, which can make multi-step instructions overwhelming or hard to sequence. Without clear step-by-step breakdowns or visual supports, I am very much a visual learner in most cases, they may become lost or anxious when left to complete tasks alone. I'm going to tell a little story here. This is not in my notes. This literally just popped into my head. I remember one time, I believe my parents were still married. I wanted to make some chocolate chip cookies. My mom had the family recipe memorized, but she was in the pool and she was cleaning. She was vacuuming the pool. We had an above ground pool at the house we lived in. So I had my baby brother, or maybe my younger brother, one of them, running back and forth with instructions. Well, the first instruction was, and this is how my mom always did it, was the butter or the margarine that was used to put it on a stove, very low heat, and let it melt. That way it integrates all the other ingredients a lot easier. We often, this is in lieu of, leaving a stick of butter or a stick of margarine on the counter to hit room temperature. We would probably microwave it to soften it up a bit. But put it in a saucepan and let it melt a little bit, and then you do everything else. The one instruction that was missing in all of that was to take it off the stove. So now I'm adding all of these other ingredients as my mom tells me to add them, with my brothers running. They were the messengers. Okay, now what? Go ask mom. Now what? At one point I asked, when do I take this off the heat? Because it was not explicitly said to do so. My mom did not say, as soon as the butter's melted, turn the heat off, and then you add the rest of the ingredients. She didn't say that. In fairness to me, being autistic and feeling confused about everything, she did not say that. Thankfully, I thought to ask, do I take this off the heat at some point? I don't remember how the cookies turned out, but I just remember she was freaking the fuck out. She gets out of the pool. She comes inside. I says, you never said to take it off the heat. And I'm sure she said something along the lines of it being common sense, whatever. That's the kind of thing that falls under executive functioning differences for me. And I just wanted to share that with you. So let's jump back into our psychology talk for the week. Number 3, memory and information processing. Recent studies suggest that children with autism often experience broad memory challenges, including difficulties with working memory and retaining instructions. This means they may forget steps or lose track of what they are supposed to do, especially if instructions are lengthy or complex. Theory of mind and social understanding. Number 4. Theory of mind, the ability to understand others' thoughts, intentions, and perspectives, is often less developed in autistic children. As a result, they may struggle to infer what an adult really means or expects, particularly if instructions are not explicit. This can lead to anxiety about making mistakes or being reprimanded. Let's go back to my verbally abusive father, for not meeting unspoken expectations. That was a huge one for me. I remember. That was a big one for me. I'm just going to leave it there. Emotional impact and self-esteem. Repeated confusion or negative feedback can foster anxiety, avoidance, or low self-esteem. If an autistic child is frequently left alone with unclear instructions and then blamed for not listening or not trying, go back to that pause I had just a minute ago, they may internalize a sense of failure, further impacting their willingness or ability to engage with future tasks. I'm going to tell you another story. One of the ways that I found to override this one in my own life was, was it my final no, it had to have been the semester before, so the second to last semester for my associate's degree all those years ago. So fairly new still on my healing journey and finding that proof because of all the doubt that I had about my father's intentions, about my father's behaviors, about, how I felt about myself because of my father. I had 11 credits for the classes I had. I needed 12 to keep my full-time financial aid, which I desperately needed. So I scour through the entire schedule, what's available, and I found for 1 credit, meeting 3 days a week for the entire semester, a piano class, beginning piano. And I signed up for it because this was something I had always wanted to do since I was a child. This was one of the many things that, when voiced to my parents, my father said we didn't have enough money. I would completely suck at it and blah, 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 blah. So naturally, that old programming is kicking in until I finally sat down with myself and said, okay, listen. Would the next 16 weeks be enough time to determine if you're any good at this or if you enjoy this? I decided yes. Okay, here's what we're going to do here. You are going to take the class and you are going to enjoy it as you would have when you were 8, 9, 10 years old. Just enjoy the process. If at the end of the semester you get a bad grade or it wasn't as fun as you thought it would be, which was the case. I got an A in the class. It was easy. It was fun, but it didn't spark anything for me. So to determine that I had put enough effort into it to make me happy, that I gave it a fair shake, now I can walk away because this is just not as fun as I thought it was. Setting that up ahead of time has really helped me engage in future tasks when things like that have catch up to me, basically. I talked about this a couple weeks ago about how scared and nervous I was heading into the consultation for my gastric bypass. And how many times a day I went back and forth, flip flop. Should I cancel the appointment? Should I go to the appointment? And it was because of this story about the piano class that popped into my head that finally got me to say, just go to the consultation and talk to the surgeon. Then, if it doesn't feel right, don't do it. But after the consultation, I was skipping to my car because I was so excited because I knew it would work. I knew everything would be okay for me and I didn't really have to worry about anything. And I was prepared. It's going to suck with the recovery for the first month or so. So this is what you do to make it better. You listen to your surgeon and do what they tell you to do for your post-op care. It was that story that popped into my head that made me keep that appointment for the consultation for my gastric bypass. And it's a very useful tool. So my message to anybody out there listening, thinking, oh, I really want to do this, but you keep talking yourself out of shit because you have your doubts, your fears, all of that early childhood programming from your parents, whatever the situation is. Sit down, determine a reasonable amount of time and effort into the new experience you're about to have. Write it down on the calendar. I will give this 3 months. I will give this 1 month. I will give this a year. Whatever it is that feels like an adequate, if I'm not having as much fun, did I give enough effort to make me happy that I can walk away and say, you know what, I gave it a shot. It just wasn't for me, with no regret that maybe you should have kept going. Sit to the best of your ability, set that time frame. And then just go for it. Because the truth of the matter is, you are not going to know anything until you actually do it. You're not going to know if you're any good at it. You're not going to know if you enjoy it. You may find out that you enjoy it a lot, but you kind of suck at it, but it doesn't matter because you're having fun. Keep going with it anyway, but set a time frame. For me, it was an entire semester. And I could have gone on because it was only 1 credit for the next class, the next level up from there. But I gave it enough effort to know that, okay, I really don't care about learning to play the piano any better than this. I gave it a shot. It wasn't as much fun as I thought. I'm good. I can walk away. I have found that trusting that, and when those moments of doubt creep up, especially in the beginning, it's easy to tell myself, wait, no, it's too early. It's not this date yet. We haven't gotten to this date yet to make this determination. So why are we worrying? Just have fun with it. Just enjoy the process. Learn what you need to learn. That would be my best advice. Because you're not going to know any of that stuff until you actually do it. So, some of the best practices that were recommended here. Psychological and educational research recommends using clear, concrete, and visually supported instructions for autistic children, breaking tasks into single steps, using checklists or schedules. That one is a huge, huge, huge tool that I use. I've got checklists for what are the dates for my podcast episodes. So I know when to come in with the birthdays for the characters. So I know when to add this or add that. Through the end of the year. Through the end of the year, actually we'll be wrapping up Chamber of Secrets at the end of the year, just to let you know. I got lists for different goals for the week when it comes to my podcast, when it comes to some of the things, the little projects I got going on here at home. Writing a list of tasks for myself to keep myself going every day. Make sure I do some research on the podcast, make sure I do some writing on the podcast, make sure I record something for the podcast, my social media posts, etc., etc. I've got lists and schedules and all sorts of shit. When I was in school, I used my Google Calendar and I color coded my classes. And I would switch them because I had 4 classes a semester, a typical 16-week semester, but each class was broken up into 8 weeks. And so we would do 2 classes in the first 8 weeks and 2 classes in the second 8 weeks. And because we are cramming 16 weeks of information into 8 weeks per class, I needed my Google Calendar. So one class would be purple, the other would be pink. And I would write down which chapters to read on Monday for the pink class, start on Tuesday for the purple class. My reminders for the discussion boards, because it was a completely online program. We got credit for that. And, I wanted to get all the points I possibly could for my classes to get the best grades possible. So my reminders to participate in the discussion boards, when certain assignments were done, when we had to have a quiz or a test, or everything was pink for one class, purple for the other. When we switched to the second 2 classes, it was orange and green, so I could visually see all that. My workouts were a completely different color from that. My personal chores, a completely different color from all those. It works, you guys. So if you struggle with things like that, checklists and schedules are the big thing. And then providing positive reinforcement can I lost my place. Providing positive reinforcement can significantly improve compliance, reduce anxiety, and foster independence. Yeah. I managed a lot of anxiety through school just by using my Google Calendar in that way. So, in summary, the confusion autistic children experience with instructions is rooted in literal language processing, executive function differences, memory challenges, and social cognitive factors. Recognizing and supporting these needs is critical for their emotional well-being and success. Yeah, absolutely. I don't care that I am in my 50s and I need to use Google Calendar like that, or I've got lists of different things that I need to do. I'm going to use what I can to make my life that much easier, since my childhood was that fucking confusing. Okay? Looking back, I can see how my confusion around instructions was made so much worse by my parents' emotionally immature approach to parenting. We talked about emotional immaturity a couple episodes ago. Instead of recognizing that I needed clarity or support, their expectations were often unspoken, as if I should just know what to do. Never mind that I process things differently. And when I didn't meet those invisible standards, it wasn't seen as a need for guidance, but as a failure on my part, not theirs. I'm the child. How the fuck am I supposed to know any of this shit? That's my thought. And as long as my struggles didn't disrupt their comfort or their routine, I was able to just fine. My silence and compliance were often mistaken for understanding and contentment, rather than the anxiety and uncertainty that I was actually feeling. And it is that mismatch between my needs and their expectations that often left me feeling isolated and unseen. And I mentioned this last week or the week before. I mentioned it last week. Journey from platform 9 3/4. Was it that? I don't know. I mentioned, always being that child that, oh, she's fine. Yeah, she's fine. And that mentality not only dismissed my very real confusion, but it also made it harder for me to ask for help or even recognize that I needed it. Hyper independence, hello. It's a dynamic that so many autistic kids experience when emotional maturity and unrealistic expectations from the adults around them who are supposed to protect them and guide them and teach them and love them and support them meet neurodivergent needs. The result is often a profound sense of being misunderstood and feeling very much alone. So, pulling this back into Harry's world, it was clear to me that Harry was very much feeling the same sense of confusion I often felt. Um, when you really read, how Harry was feeling about um, this sorting ceremony, he didn't know anything about this. Nobody to tell him what's going on. Hell, Ron didn't even know because nobody told him. I don't know if this is like kind of a secret or something, but in Ron's case, I would argue that, he probably just didn't know, and everybody around him probably assumed that he did know because he's damn near the youngest of 7 children. He's number 6 of 7. So he even says, Fred says it hurts a lot, but I think he was just joking when he's talking to Harry about the sorting ceremony and what this is about. And Harry's sense of panic when the idea of, oh shit, am I supposed to do a spell? I, you know, I felt Harry and Ron's confusion, but especially Harry's, because Harry did not grow up in the wizarding world like Ron did. And unfortunately, for me, I think, definitely not what I experienced, but, Harry in an instant had Ron, he had Hagrid, he had Fred and George Weasley, and a whole host of people in this world who would help him navigate those uncertain moments, as we are going to see moving forward. And while I didn't have that same support throughout my childhood, I am now in the mindset that my true family is out there. I talked about this last week or the week before again. No, I talked about it last week. That, my true family is still out there. So I'm feeling very alone, like Harry did last week, not knowing anybody and having to speak up when he saw the Weasleys and realized, oh, okay, they're a magical family. They should know how to get onto the platform. And without hesitation, Molly's like, oh, sure, dear. This is how you do it. Watch Percy. And, go ahead, give it a go. And I never had that. Harry never had that. But like I said, with this mindset of my true family coming in, there is a slight twinge of I can't wait. Because the people, Harry's soul family, if you will, that's what I'm waiting for. I'm waiting for my soul family, my future spouse, my future sister I never had, my future big brother I never had, etc. And in that new dynamic that's awaiting me, I will finally be around people who genuinely care and understand me. I trust that's out there. They are not going to dismiss me like Aunt Petunia did by not even telling Harry how to get onto platform 9 3/4. They're not going to ignore me. They're not going to assume that I'm okay when I'm really not. They're going to know that I'm not okay and not let me brush it off with, it's fine, I'm tired, the same old shit that I always do. And they'll see the pain and not run from me, but rather stay and support me. So I am very much looking forward to that. And since I don't want to end this week's episode on such a heavy note, let's talk about something that's canon. Okay. Since we're talking about the sorting hat, Specifically the idea of a hat stall, which is when the sorting hat takes more than 5 minutes to decide which house to send a new student. It's common knowledge for us diehard Potter fans that Professor McGonagall was a hat stall. We also get the idea that Neville was, or nearly was, a hat stall as well. As for myself, I did the official Pottermore sorting quiz, and my results showed. I don't remember all the results, and I can't go back and find it. I did look, but between Hufflepuff and Ravenclaw, nearly 50-50 split between those two houses alone. Showing up, I think it was like 38% Hufflepuff and 37% Ravenclaw on the final test. So it could have gone either way. And I probably would have been a hat stall for the poor sorting hat to figure out, okay, does she go in Hufflepuff or does she go in Ravenclaw? Because, this really could go either way. The quiz obviously put me as a Hufflepuff because that one came out at 38%, whereas the Ravenclaw came in at 37%. So it is possible that I would have been a hat stall as well. In fact, I take great pride in these results because the qualities of each house do fit me perfectly. So much so that my combined house was just something a lot of us like to talk about and think about. My combined house would have been Huffleclaw. I would have been a Huffleclaw. Part Hufflepuff with that slight edge over Ravenclaw. In reality, it depends on my day and my mood. Today, clearly, I am resonating with my Ravenclaw traits, if you will. But the idea of the hat stall was just, I thought, kind of interesting because when I read that and read that Professor McGonagall, can you imagine what was going on in that woman's head? She was probably arguing with the sorting hat at the age of 11. I want to be in Gryffindor, arguing with the sorting hat for 5 minutes. I could see that. But Harry was not a hat stall. That conversation lasted less than a minute, I think, as it would have played out in real time, before declaring him a Gryffindor. But Neville was definitely a hat stall, or nearly a hat stall. I mean, I think the actual canon on that was less than 30 seconds away from the 5 minute mark. So 4 minutes 30 something, 4 minutes 40 something. So yeah, Neville was nearly a hat stall. But anyway, that wraps it up for me this week. This was kind of an interesting. Let me check my notes before I wrap it up because I got a few more minutes here. Yeah, actually, I think I covered everything. Yeah, I covered everything. So, I think we're going to wrap it up this week, everybody. Thank you for joining me. I know I need to get better at doing all the calls to action, which is why I put the title card at the end. So if you like this podcast, do all the things, like, subscribe, it's free, comment, share, etc., etc. And next week we are going to dive into Chapter 8, The Potions Master. I am going to admit to you this week right now that I do not have very much to talk about as it relates to Harry Potter. So I'm going to have to sit and think about bringing some value to you. We might do some fun things, but as far as connecting to a particular chapter, I didn't really connect to next week. So next week's going to be interesting. Stay tuned. We'll see what I come up with. But until then, you belong in whatever your house is. So I got to say it for me. You belong in Ravenclaw. Okay, that's it for me. I'm going to stop being a Harry Potter dork now. And I love you guys. Have a wonderful week. And we'll see what I come up with next week. Like I said, it's going to be interesting because nothing really connected for me for chapter 8. So have a wonderful week. Enjoy your common room. And yeah. This has probably got to be the crappiest ending I've ever had to a podcast episode to date. But you know what? We live and we learn, and I just roll with it. In case you haven't figured it out, I just hit record, I start talking, and you get what you get. So it's been an enormous help to me. Um, Otherwise, have a good week. I'll see you then.